So I want to show you hands-on how to set up your own grow space inside your home. I am in a spare bedroom right now, or part of a spare bedroom, and you can see that I am growing a fair amount of microgreens. I have 3 racks right now set up. I grow 20 trays per rack, so I have 60 trays that I can grow in this small space in just part of this room. Now, if you have even smaller space than this, you can start with a smaller rack. You don't need one of these big 4 foot wide racks. These work great if you are gonna grow for profit, but I have here the original rack I started on. You can see this thing is tiny. It's 2 feet by 1 foot. Nice and short. It was easy to just put on the end of my aisle in my kitchen, and I could grow 10 trays on it. That's how I got my start with growing microgreens for profit. I was growing for one restaurant at the time, and as I started to see sales come in, as I started to realize how much I love doing this, then I realized I could scale up my operation. I am a huge advocate of starting with a very lean setup. This is going to help you to be able to reach profitability so much sooner than if you are investing, taking out loans, trying to rent a large space before you even know if this is something that you want to do. You can start right now with a space that you carve out in your own living environment. Home-based microgreens operations are profitable, fun, easy to integrate into your life. So think about what spaces you have. Like we've talked about, there's so many different spaces that you could grow microgreens. A spare bedroom works great. A garage, a basement, a shed, a laundry room. I have students growing in their pantry or entryway, in a living room that's not used. Some people have a family room, a living room, and really one of those rooms is underutilized. Think about a room. Do you have a spare bedroom that is used maybe twice a year? Could you possibly convert that into a growing space for most of the year? Do you have a storage area where really you've been storing stuff that you haven't even looked in those totes for years? Could you possibly declutter, get rid of some stuff, and carve out a space to start growing, living, functional food? It feels so good to do this. We had a small space in my house when I started growing the kitchen, and then as I was wanting to grow more, we just downsized, got rid of some stuff, and carved out part of a room, set up a larger rack, and started increasing my growing. So let's look at the things that you need to get started. Once you picked a space, you're gonna want to choose a rack. I love these larger racks. They're very sturdy. They hold microgreens trays perfectly. I have the exact one that I use linked in my supply list. Now you don't have to get that exact one. I just want to give you a starting point if you just are overwhelmed, there's so many racks. You can go to Costco, you can go wherever the big box store near you and get a rack. Just look at the dimensions in proportion to the trays that you're going to be using to make sure that you're maximizing your space. I like to grow in these 10-20 flats, so I picked racks that fit them neatly without a lot of extra wasted space. If you have a really small amount of space, you might want to start with a smaller rack like this. You can still fit 10 trays on this little rack, which is a lot of microgreens. Think about what might be available to you where you live. I have a supply list with links, but that may or may not be applicable to you depending on where you live. I've got people all over the world who want to start growing microgreens. So think about what is available to you. You may be able to find some of these core items used secondhand. You may be able to repurpose. So think about what your vision, what your mission is, what your budget is, how much time you have. You may have the time to start looking on we've got so many options now, Facebook Marketplace, Buy Nothing groups, all of these things. You may be able to find some of these things for free, which again is going to help you to reach that profitability sooner. So you're going to want to start getting some kind of rack so that you can grow vertically, maximize your space if you're growing in your home, which is what this class is all about. Once you have your rack, you're going to need some kind of grow lights. I have these Barina lights on my supply list. They are a great entry-level grow light, and I suggest them mostly because you can really go down the rabbit hole with grow lights. There are so many on the market, so many. and it can get confusing and overwhelming. So I give you a starter light that works great. These Barrina LED grow lights, they're very efficient. They have a full spectrum. They also have the red blue. It's kind of a pinkish color. You can see I have a mix of both. I've done a lot of experimenting. Honestly, I don't see a huge difference in yields. So get what you like. If you are really look at the studies and think these red, blue, pinkish lights are the best for microgreens, it's true. Those are the light spectrums that microgreens are going to best absorb. Go with those. If that color turns you off and you like to see the actual white light where you can see those bright greens, pick the all spectrum. Either way, get some lights so you can get started. I like to use 2 lights per shelf on these Barrina lights. So do the math. Look at your shelf, decide how many microgreens you want to start growing. If you're going to use all of the shelves on your rack, then you're going to need 10 lights. So 5 shelves, 2 per shelf. Start with that. If you just want to get started with a couple of the shelves on the rack and leave a couple shelves for storage for your stack trays, you can do that too. One of the great things about a microgreens business is that you can scale it as you go. You can order more things. So I started with 1 rack. Once I was getting enough orders to completely sell all the microgreens I was growing on this larger rack, I bought another rack and just duplicated what I'd already learned, what was already working. Really easy to do. You know how to set up your lights. I just evenly space my shelves. I make my shelves universal for all my crops rather than adjusting the lights for different crops or for different times in the grow cycle. This just really simplifies the process for me. I have about 15 inches between my shelves and about 10 inches from my lights to my trays. So let's talk about trays. I love these Bootstrap Farmer trays. They are fantastic. I have a solid tray and then I have a tray with holes. So I seat my tray with holes into my tray without holes. So when you're planning how many trays you're going to need, you need to be thoughtful. And I'll go over this more. If you choose to jump into the program with me, we'll talk a lot more about the nuances of what you need for supplies. But to start out, you're gonna need a tray with holes, a tray without if you plan to bottom water. I highly recommend bottom watering when you're growing in your home. It's very neat. You're not getting water everywhere, easier to control the humidity in the environment. So think about what trays. You may find trays locally. I like these 10-20 trays. They're kind of industry standard. There's also smaller trays that you can grow in. So again, think about the scale you want to grow in. There's 10 by 10s, Bootstrap Farmer makes as well. And these little 5 by 5s, which can work really well also. So think about what kind of trays. Again, the 10 by 20 I feel like I get the highest yield and can just get my system dialed in with a uniform size tray. That's what I use for the majority of my growing. Just want to factor in that you're going to need a set of trays with holes and a set of trays without holes. If you're going to want to be producing microgreens every single week, you're going to need double the trays because you're going to have 2 rotations growing at one time. So be thoughtful about that as well. Know that you can always invest in more trays as you are growing, but get something to get you started. Let's talk a little bit more about the grow environment. A few of the factors you want to make sure you're controlling when you're growing in your home, whether you're growing, like I said, in a spare room, basement, a shed, in an entryway, in a laundry room, pantry, all these places we've talked about that you might be growing, that you've carved out a little space. You want to think about controlling the temperature, controlling the humidity, and controlling airflow. So most of us live in homes that are fairly comfortable. This is temperature-wise. This is one of the big perks to growing in your home is you're already paying to heat your home. So why not capitalize on that and keep your microgreens comfortable at the same temperature? If you're comfortable, your microgreens are comfortable. They love to be around 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. There can be some range in there. So if your home's a little bit cooler, that's gonna be fine. Your growth cycle might just be a little bit longer. The next thing you want to think about controlling is your humidity. Now there's several ways you can do this, and this really depends on where you live and how humid your home is at baseline. I use a large dehumidifier. You can see it here behind me. It's actually a 50 pint. I recommend, if you're going to be growing 3 racks or more, to get a 50 to 70 pint dehumidifier. You may be able to get away with a smaller one. I don't know if you can see my little small guy here. If you're only growing a single rack, just a little dehumidifier is going to help you to manage that humidity. You may also think about setting up an exhaust system. Again, this is a different way of managing humidity, where you are either using a window or you actually cut a hole into your wall to exhaust air out. This may or may not work depending on your space. You want to think about airflow regardless of if you're going to be exhausting air, pushing air out and pulling air in. You want to keep air circulating in your grow environment. And we can do that with a simple oscillating fan. You see mine behind me. I've turned it off just for this video so it's not so noisy. Same with my dehumidifier. Can get a little bit background noise. You want to have this at least an oscillating fan. You may consider having an overhead fan as well. You can even get fans for your racks. Well, I don't think they're absolutely necessary. If you're having trouble with your microgreens being wet, they may be something that you consider investing in. But definitely want to start with an oscillating fan or 2 in your grow space so that you have air always circulating. So we've talked about racks. We've talked about grow lights, we've talked about trays. These are your basics for growing. We've talked about the grow environment, which is managing temperature, managing humidity, managing airflow. You can see it's pretty simple. I want to show you a few of the other supplies that I have here. One is a simple watering can. This little basic watering can works fantastic for bottom watering. You can also consider, depending if you have access to a sink, you can get an adapter, a simple hose adapter where you can fit a flexible, stretchy hose onto a sink, and you can use a hose and nozzle to bottom water, where you're just going to be spraying or using your watering can to water in each of your trays. I recommend hand watering if you're growing on a small scale. It's a great way to get really familiar with how your microgreens are growing. Hands on your trays every day. This is going to help you to really be in touch with that process and to dial in how much water do they need. You'll see it fluctuates as they grow. They'll need more and more water as they get bigger and bigger. There's problems with underwatering, problems with overwatering. So hand watering, whether it's with a watering can, with a hose and nozzle, right in your home, on your racks, is going to help you to figure out what they need. Remember, these grow really quickly, so we're getting feedback every week and able to tweak things to get them just that much better. I have a colander here just designated for rinsing seed. 5-gallon buckets come in really handy, or you'll need some kind of container for soaking your seed, for those seeds that you soak. I'm going to be emailing you my beginner's seed guide, seed ordering guide, and my beginner's cheat sheet. So watch your emails after this class. Make sure that you're getting those resources. They're going to help you along with this video. You'll want a simple scale for weighing your seed. I like using some kind of bins or storage containers for storing seed. And I get a lot of questions about my soil press. So I just wanted to show you it here. It's very simple handmade soil press with plywood and a handle. It helps me to compress the soil when I fill the trays. Now, I am not filling my trays and planting my seeds in this room. This is another important thing to talk about. When you're picking your grow space, it is likely not going to be your workspace unless you're blessed with a huge space. Some people have a huge basement space to work with, or a huge shed or something like this, where they can have workspace and grow space next to each other. If you are carving out a smaller space, say in a spare room or in some other corner of your house, likely your workspace will be a different space. It may be on your porch. That's what it was for me for a long time, my back porch, before I had my greenhouse. It may be a greenhouse if you have a greenhouse. A greenhouse or a hoop house make a great workspace where you can fill trays, water them in, sprinkle your seed, compress them down, and stack them and move them into your grow environment to germinate. If you don't have a space, just using the outside or using your garage can work fine. If you have a big enough space that you can do both in one space, that works as well. So again, you've got to be creative here. Think about where you can do this. A workspace, you need it to be able to get a little bit messy if you're growing in soil, which is what I teach and what I recommend. I love growing in soil. I use a peat-based soil mix. I recommend mixes made by SunGrow and ProMix. I get asked those questions a lot, but find something that's local to you that you can purchase locally when it comes to soil. So your workspace should be someplace that can get a little bit dirty. Now, if you need to use your garage or something and you want to keep it clean, just put a tarp down. You'll need some kind of table or surface to work on. A simple folding table works great. Easy, low budget investment. Get a folding table designated for microgreens. It can be your workspace. You can scale up from there. You'll need some kind of water source. It is helpful if you have a hose with a nozzle. If you don't, you can use a watering can with a fine mist head for this. You may also use a handheld sprayer like this. I use this for top watering sometimes, just fill it with water, and it's simple pump action, and you can water your trays in this way. So be thinking about a workspace, a grow space, if these will be two separate spaces or one in the same. But I'm hoping as you're seeing me in this space here, in this bedroom, your wheels are starting to turn. You're starting to get excited thinking, yes, I could do this. I can start to see this part of my house I could designate for a grow space. People ask a lot about putting something to protect the walls. I don't find that necessary. Again, I'm managing my humidity. I'm keeping my humidity right around 40%. My temperature between 70 and 75%, so the walls are not getting damp and moist. I am managing for that. Plus, I'm keeping that constant airflow. But if you want to put something up on the walls, you certainly can. I do protect the floors. There's nice hardwood floors in here, so I use something called a splat mat under my racks. They're actually made to go under high chairs. If you have little kids, maybe you've used this. So they're really easy to clean up. Any little debris that falls down, you can clean up. I have a designated shop vac in my space. This is just for microgreens, so pretty much I just am using it to suck up seed holes and any other little things that have fallen on the ground. The splat mat repels water, so you can easily keep everything very dry if you do have any little drips. So I don't think that's on my list actually, but just Google it, splat mat, or under high chair, whatever. There's a lot of different things. Get creative. Again, you can use a tarp. You can use, what have I seen? People use truck bed liners. You can use all kinds of things to protect your floor. Know that this whole industry, this microgreens industry, is relatively new, which means we're inventing it as we go. We're figuring this out. We're figuring out what works. And you are going to have to figure out what works in your space. I can show you how I have things set up here, the simple rack, the dimensions, my lights, my trays, how things are growing. But you're going to have to figure out what works in your space, what's available to you to purchase, and how can you get going with that. Just don't get hung up on needing the perfect thing or needing to replicate someone else's system. Find something that is available to you that you can start growing with. Just get growing. That's kind of my big message here, is get growing. Remember, I started on a windowsill, on a kitchen counter, on this little rack, and moved up to this, and now I have multiple grow spaces that I grow in. So I'm hoping that you can see this is a very scalable business. Starting small is a really smart way to start because you can learn from mistakes when the stakes are low, meaning you don't have a lot invested, and so you can tweak things and learn before you are scaling up and investing larger amounts of money. Once you start having more customers and more sales coming in, it's easier to make those investments. So start small, start lean, find a space that'll work, find a space that you can control those core elements, temperature, humidity, and airflow. Get a rack set up, get some grow lights, and get growing. I leave my grow lights on for 16 hours and then turn them off for 8. They're actually just on a timer, so I don't even have to worry about it or think about it. They go off at night, they pop on in the morning. Really easy. I have a timer on my supply list. Almost everything I've gone over, I think, is on my supply list. So if you want a reference, just go back. There's photos. Again, you don't have to use those exact links. But if you're looking and you just don't want to spend hours researching, there's some links and an easy way to grab some of the things you need to get growing. So I hope this helps. I hope you're feeling excited and ready to set up your own grow space in your own home and get growing. I'm going to get back to the slides here.